Hey everybody, Nevigosak, your host of the Populist Patriot. Got my second cup of coffee here because I'm doing all this talking and, I need something to drink. So either water or coffee is usually my beverage of choice, sometimes a nice glass of wine or a nice cocktail or whatever, although I don't always do that while I'm doing my broadcast. So anyways, let me take a little sip over here and we're going to get started. Um, So there was an article, a blog post by the geopolitical analyst, one of my favorites out there, one of the best out there, J.R. Nyquist. And it was posted on June 4th of 2022, Beijing's war plan, an interview with Lude Media, which is a LUDE. It's an anti-communist media organization. It's Beijing's war plan, an interview with Lude Media. Red Dawn is not really a movie anymore. And I encourage you to read and follow Jeff Nyquist's works and analysis. He's one of the best national security analysts out there. He understands perfectly the strategic designs of Russia and China against the United States. And what was interesting about this, in summary, is Lude Media, which has sources within communist China, they confirm what various secret speeches and defectors from the Russian Federation, as well as the secret speech of General Chi Haoxin, have said, which is that Russia and China are planning for war against the United States. And I wanted to read a couple of lines in the interview between Jeff Nyquist. And the fact that this was really very interesting. So Jeff Nyquist says in 2018, Russia conducted the Vostok 18 exercise with Mongolian and Chinese troops. It was, as I recall, simulating a nuclear bombardment of America, followed by what looked like a practice invasion for Alaska. Do you recall that? And Lude Media answered, back in February when we talked about Russia's strategy, we mentioned in our program that Russia was and had been interested in taking Alaska in the future because the strategic forces in the Far East just prepare for that. And what's interesting about that is that was concerned by the defecting Russian GRU Colonel Stanislav Lunev in his revelations to J.R. Nyquist, as well as the secret piece of PLA General Chi Haoxin in 2005, I should say, excuse me. And Jeff Nyquist said, I imagine they would attack northern Canada as well. Lude Media says, yes, absolutely. And for China, in the Intercontinental Ballistic Missile Force, there are 2 units, 2 bases in Mohi, China, in the northern part of China on the border with Russia. These 2 bases with their DF-41 ballistic missiles can reach as far as Washington, D.C. Nyquist mentions last summer, the Russians practiced an attack on Hawaii. If you remember, Lude Media commented, yep. And Nyquist also, and Lude Media also says, Lude Media says that the China-Russia strategy here is first a global strategy of depth. Second, it relies on unrestricted warfare. So what they want to do is to bring down America, bring down the U.S., like what happened to the Soviet Union. When the Soviet Union collapsed, there was no war, not a drop of bloodshed, but the whole system just collapsed from within. They are trying to achieve this kind of effect in the U.S. by turning one party against another, turning one ideology against each other. And that's where the hyper-individualistic nature of American society, American politics, and economics is our Achilles heel, as indirectly confirmed by Lude Media in the interview with J.R. Nyquist. And without a unifying principle of radical civic nationalism, the Russians and the Chinese will continue to exploit America's weaknesses brought out by our hyper-individualistic culture, society, economic, and political system. And let's see what else we have. Just Just reading through this information over here. Lude Media also talked about how on February 4th they explained in a broadcast that Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin signed a secret document to become military partners. So after that is signed, the CCP and China has been funding Russia's invasion into Ukraine. Putin needs this guarantee to even think about starting a war. So that's very interesting. That confirms that China is an ally of Russia in its aggression against Ukraine. Lude Media also commented that after the Soviet Union dissolved, China took over leader of the international world global communist movement. So that shows that the Cold War has not ended, obviously, in communism versus, quote, the United States. And in fact, Nyquist also heard through his intelligence sources in Asia that the communist governments in Southeast Asia, meaning Vietnam and its ally and puppet Laos, were informed that China and Russia were planning to go to war with the United States in the not too distant future and that they had to get ready. I heard this 2 years ago. Lude Media commented, that is for sure. We can verify this information actually. So this notion that there's a split between Vietnam and China is vastly over exaggerated, that actually Vietnam is not to be trusted if in the event, God forbid, there's a war between the United States and China. Nyquist mentions if there is a breakup of the United States or any weakening, the Russians and Chinese, I assume, will send troops to the United States. Lude Media, which has sources within the Chinese leadership, yes. Red Dawn is not a movie anymore. So, and there's a lot more we can go over in this interview, but I wanted to go through a couple of highlights. And it might not seem like anything new or earth shattering in light of things that I've talked about, both with Jeff Nyquist on this program, as well as myself independently, as well as with my co host, Herschel Miller. The fact of the matter is this Lude Media, with sources within the CCP, they confirm what people like Jeff Nyquist and I have been saying, that Russia and China are preparing for war against the United States, that much of what Jeff Nyquist writes about, particularly his more controversial takes on security policy and the conduct of Russia and China in relations with countries like Vietnam, that Nyquist is more right than wrong. So I urge you all to take a look at Jeff Nyquist's blog, Jared Nyquist's blog, and make sure you read his articles, particularly on national security policy, China and Russia. That's his strength. And he knows what he's talking about. So make sure you follow him on a weekly basis. When you comment on the articles, whether you agree or disagree, always be respectful. But Jeff Nyquist is a source of wealth of information. He also, big shout out to Jeff. Thank you so much for quoting me. My book, Red Dawn in Retrospect, and your latest paper that you wrote on your blog. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I really appreciate that. And I definitely want to continue to plug your works, your analysis, your right on target. Everyone, if you want to understand what's in store for the future between the United States and the Sino-Russian bloc, read that interview that Jeff Nyquist had with Lude Media. And thank you for listening to this broadcast.